And first up, we have God of Gnomes, God Core, number 1, a dungeon core LitRPG, written by Demi Harper, produced by Portal Books. It is 485 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. What kind of god would you be? Deep beneath the earth, Corey finds himself reborn as a god core, a sentient crystal with unusual powers. His new worshippers, a colony of incompetent gnomes scratching out an existence in their underground grotto. If that wasn't bad enough, Corey soon realizes that his gnome denizens are about to become extinct. They are threatened by groups of blundering adventurers and abducted by raiding kobolds to be sacrificed to their own dark god, an ancient, mysterious foe who does not take kindly to Corey's arrival. With the aid of his helper Sprite and a menagerie of newly evolved creatures, Corey must protect and guide his gnomes until they can stand on their own 2 feet. But the kobold army is on the march, led by this new rival's powerful avatar. It's a hard rock life being a god core. So there also says it's inspired by good god sims such as Black and White, dungeon managers like Dungeon Keeper, and civ builders like Age of Empires. God knows that they're first in it's calling itself a dungeon core story. So dungeon core story is a god core story. So I'm like, okay. This is a little bit story that combines the dungeon core mechanics with town building, community building mechanics from god games like Black and White. The reference to the series are fairly obvious if you've ever actually played those games. You'll see similarities in game mechanic styles and conflicts in the story. It's essentially about a reincarnated core that is not a dungeon core, but a god core who has the power to build up and advance a species of gnomes. Only it's not as easy as just assigning everyone jobs and making buildings. There's another god core nearby, and even one that looks to sacrifice gnomes for his own power. The game mechanics and story are actually rather detailed, with lots of descriptions of the god core powers, things like forcing, the ability to create minions and evolve them, building buildings, creating jobs options, or advancing the culture, tech, and magic trees of this community or this race of gnomes. And there's more. So it's relatively crunchy. Overall, it's a pretty good story that will appeal to town building and dungeon core fans. It cycles building, expansion, evolving creations, and then combat as humans and the other god core tries to invade the gnome territory. And it's really a cycle where it's all that town building and dungeon core stuff where you're like making traps and evolving monsters, and then it's some conflict of some way or another, some action, and then it cycles back to the other one, and then it goes around in circles for the entire story. It is an entertaining cycle of action and community development. So if that's what you're into, if you like that stuff, great. I think you're really actually going to enjoy this quite a bit. Me, I've read this kind of story before. I've read a ton of dungeon core novels, and the only thing that the story's kind of bringing to the table that's new is the inclusion of evolving a culture and bringing in those kind of god game perspective kind of mechanics. Other than that, though, it does feel very similar to a lot of other dungeon core kind of stories and novels. So it's not really bringing a ton new for me. But again, if you really like town building aspects in your dungeon core stories, you're going to like this, and this is going to be entertaining for you. It was for me. I get score 7.5 out of 10. God of Gnomes, God Core number 1, a dungeon core LitRPG with a score of 7.5 out of 10.